Good afternoon, everyone. Very, very big welcome to our hashtag productivity session today, where we are talking with the Blue Ninjas again. And I'm so excited to have Louisa and Julie back with us today. So welcome, girls. Nice to have you here. So today we are talking about project management tools. We are talking Asana versus Trello versus Monday.com and whatever else might come up during this conversation today. So I'm super keen. I think it's a really crucial point for us to consider, just because there are so many tools available. And sometimes people get confused and they're like, there's so many options. Which one is the right one? Which one is the best one? Is there a right one? Is there a best one? So brought these two ladies on board with us today, just to have that conversation, to hash it out and see, what we can come up with. So firstly, Louisa and Julie, and I don't know who's going to answer which question. So, you've got the stage, but let's talk task versus project management. Is there a difference? Because sometimes people get confused. We've got this idea of project management, like really, really big, versus task management is maybe just like a little to-do list where you've got tick boxes, right? So is there a difference? And should we even care that there's a difference?
Yeah, well, I'll start on this and Louisa will tag team with me. So, you probably start with a to-do list and you think, oh, project, I'm a small business. I don't need project. That sounds quite serious. But as soon as you start a task, if it impacts something else, then it can turn into a project, because you've got to think about the other moving parts. So projects, if you do them well, they can bring significant change and real strengths to the business if you just consider all the aspects of your business. Think about structure, how this is going to impact things going forward, and giving it a bit of thought before you just jump in there will just really help things succeed.
Yeah, I think if you're creating a database of contacts, a CRM, you're looking at what information you have. What systems do you still need? What are you using? What do you need to bring in short term, long term? So there's a lot of variables when you're looking at a project, whereas a task might be, put this here. So I think you've got to sort of weigh out sort of the extent of the deliverables against what you're doing. And, a task is probably very quick and easy, whereas a project might be, multiple tasks make up a project. So there's a few elements,
that makes sense.
Yeah, how does your information interact? Who do you need to interact with it? What stakeholders do you need on board? So, there's a lot of elements of the project that I guess, as Julie said, you sort of start with an idea and then as you grow, you're like, oh, actually, we need to really map this out and break it down.
Yeah,
absolutely. Yeah, I totally agree. And I think sometimes as maybe solo entrepreneurs, or, if it's just you're like, is it even worth considering things around project management? Because it's something that sounds really big, but I guess if you think about a goal, for example, that could effectively be your project, and all of the milestones that go in along with that, those become your tasks, right? So I think it's a valid consideration regardless of who you are and the size of business that you've got. Cool. Okay. So talk to me about digital versus pen and paper. What has worked for you guys? I think if you are in a team, then sometimes it makes sense to do something digital, because at least you can sort of track what people are working on and, what the progress has been. But I find sometimes in my business, I'm like, man, I actually just wish I could just do pen and paper, because there's this, that endorphin rush that you get when you can tick something off or like strike it out and know that it's done, which you don't really get as much if you are just ticking something off on a digital platform. So what are you ladies using?
Yeah, I mean, there used to be a time when we could get together and, write things up on flip charts and stick Post-it notes up on the wall. But now we live in the same city, but we're sort of 3-4 miles apart. So we've had to go more digital than previously we have done. We don't have a fixed office. If you've got a fixed office and people can all work there together, then that's great, until somebody opens the door and all the Post-it notes fly off the wall.
And that happens.
Yeah, that does happen. Or you end up walking off with one on your shoe. And so whether we've wanted to or not, we've had to go digitally. So, we need to think about how we can collaborate. What sort of tools are we going to use to collaborate? Just simple things like writing a process document that there's a way that we can work on it at the same time, that we're not creating version after version and who's on that version and did you know there's a new version. And that's where, if you're in a larger team, you've got to keep that comms under control and archiving, and because there's nothing more soul destroying and going back and editing a document than going, oh no, there's a new one over there. And it's just like, so it's obviously something that works for you within your business, and you've got to think how you're going to work with your client.
Yeah. I think the growth of technology as well, that this has been built into how a software is developed. You know, those questions of how do you share information, it's sort of at the forefront of a tool build now, rather than sort of being an afterthought when you say, oh, but hang on, how do I make sure that person can get it? So, you know, with a lot of development, that's been much more of a consideration. But I think also you can have digital overload. So we're very aware of online is great, but sometimes you do need to write it down and sort of step away from your laptop and sort of think strategically. So, you know, we always say, don't be scared of a piece of paper, because often if you want to map something out, that's the best way to do it, because it does get it out of your head without feeling like, you know, oh, is my box straight? You know, have I got the link correct? The arrows, which is usually how I start to snowball on a, you know, when I'm developing something on a laptop. So, you know, a piece of paper just sort of takes out that element of build and just gets your thoughts down. So, you know, it simplifies a little bit. I like, there was a thing I saw a while ago where someone actually writes down what they've done during the day and then just ticks it off on a piece of paper, because it's the feeling
afterwards
of a list.
I know somebody else that does that.
Oh man. But it's true. And I mean, I think that's why some of these task management or project management tools have tried to gamify some of that. Like I think about Asana. If you tick off a certain number of items, you might get a unicorn going across your screen, you know, and so they're trying to duplicate that idea. But I don't think that there's anything that can come close to being on a piece of paper and just being like, it's done. I don't have to worry about it anymore. Totally. I wanted to just add on a comment there to what you guys were saying. I think sometimes for me, I can get like planning paralysis, especially if it's online, like you were saying, Louisa. And I'm like, okay, cool. I need to make sure everything looks perfect and everything is related to everything else. But actually, I spend like hours just planning online, whereas if I had just written everything down, I might have gotten to the point where I can take action faster. And I sometimes also use planning to procrastinate. I don't know about you ladies. I enjoy planning, but then sometimes I never get to the action step that goes along with that.
Yeah. And I think going back to your first point about project management, starting with just writing it down will feel like there's a starting point. As you said, procrastination can be a real problem with this, you know, particularly if you're sort of going, oh, what am I going to deliver? What am I saying? You know, it's just a matter of getting started. And then usually for us, it'll just flow through. So if we start working with a new client, Julie and I will tend to have a brainstorming session and map out. And then we start to build our plan and deliverables. But it's always that starting point of, you know, get yourself going and then figure out the rest later. You know, how many big businesses say they could spend months just on the planning part of their work, because that's the bit that if you don't have that right at the start, by the time you get to your milestones and your deliverables, things might be missed or it might not be complete. So, it's quite important.
That's true. Yeah, I agree with that. And I think just adding on that, I think we have to remember that our plans have to be flexible, right? Because if you're spending months planning something, it might look completely different in the rollout in any case. So, which is why I think digital planning is really helpful, right? Because you can start adjusting things. And if you start thinking about your Gantt charts and all of those types of things and starting to move your milestones and see how it impacts on everything else, that is really where the power of working online comes in as opposed to being paper-based.
Yeah.
Which brings me to my next question, which is talk to us about Asana versus Trello. So these two, I think people are more familiar with than some of the other tools. What has been your experience, if you've had any, with these two tools? Pros and cons, cost effectiveness. I don't know. Where do we even start with these two?
Yeah, we've used both. I think Asana was one that was brought to us, whereas Trello was one that we actively looked at. So I think from our perspective. You know, often if you're brought in on a project and someone says, oh, here's the tool we're using, you know, you've kind of got to try to work with it rather than resist it. And it can be a struggle. I think with Asana, it's quite a, it's got a lot of elements. It's quite detailed. It has a lot of features. I think it's got free versions and paid versions. So there are differences between what you may want versus what you can get with the tools, as is with a lot of free tools out there now. But I think with these two, you're looking at a Kanban board. So it comes down to what sort of tool will work for you. So it's quite visual. You're looking at categories of information that you can group together and then work through the different elements of those categories, your cards, essentially. So both Asana and Trello use Kanban boards as a way of delivering the information. I think what they have is the features that go with it. So with Asana, there's a lot of variables of being able to set up your tasks within a card. So I'll call the elements of each Kanban a card, just for clarity. So a card will have, you could put a calendar with it, you could put tasks with it, you could attach documents with it. You write in the card, what the steps are, engage with each other on it. I think what Julie and I found, please step in here, Julie, when we had a team working there, but we didn't have much experience with Asana, we struggled a lot.
Sure, yeah.
Because the person that brought it to us had a really strong view of how to use it. And it was just like, it just does this, it just does that. And it was just like, and there were other people, part of our group, that aren't in the project management space, and they really, really struggled. So, I think sometimes it's about not necessarily the tool, but how somebody introduces you to it. And, Louisa in particular picks up tools, at the drop of a hat and starts working with them. And we just didn't find it as intuitive as other things we've used. So, it's got lots of things to use on it, but we just didn't quite get the best out of it.
Yeah. Absolutely. I think, sorry, go for it, Louisa.
With it as well, like we're quite used to WhatsApp now, where you can a message and chat back and things, that fluidity. But often someone will only be on it every so often. So, of course, they'll be down the list of chats and comments and then start to reply to something above. And that really affected us because, of course, we couldn't then relate what the conversation was back to the context. So, again, there's those elements that, you have to be very clear about what you're talking about in your tools as well.
Yeah.
And
absolutely.
I think you can throw a heap of online videos and webinars and things at people and say, like, watch this, it'll tell you everything. But actually, it's that quality of sitting down together and going, what do we need it to do for us? How are we going to make this work for us? That is that possibly missing ingredient that I think companies are so far forward in, online videos, just go there and find it. Whereas you really need to sit down as a team and say, well, what does this button do? What are we going to use this for? How are we going to put our information in? Even things like naming cards. To me, I'll name something differently to Julie, just because that's the way that our personal preference.
Yeah, absolutely. I think you touched on a valuable point there. I think it's so easy to look at all of these tools and say, cool, this is a great tool. I'm going to use this tool, except I don't actually understand the problem that I'm trying to solve, right? You first have to understand the problem you're trying to solve and then try and find the tool that matches that need, as opposed to like using the tool and saying, okay, cool, how can I use this in my business? And being broad like that. So it's absolutely about how you roll out this new tool, the process around it, as you guys said, like introducing this tool to the rest of your team, I think is super crucial. But at the end of the day, it needs to solve the problem that you have. And it has to be an existing problem, right? Otherwise, what's the point of having all these tools? I like that. Okay.
Trello is a great tool because it's very simplified. And I think if you're going to start with a management tool like this, Trello is usually a good way to get introduced to a Kanban board style. It's not intimidating. I think Asana, we felt a bit intimidated by how much was there, at your fingertip. Whereas with Trello, it's a bit of a step back. So the free option, you build your board, then you start to develop your areas with cards, and then you work through it, and you can shift between cards. So if you have a task, maybe you might have, say, 3 things to do, doing, done. You can move your cards very easily from one to the other. I think a lot of the Kanban tools are that easy now. There never used to be.
Yeah.
But then
that's it.
Yeah, and I think as well that when you're looking at a tool, and between Julie and my experience, we shifted from using G Suite and Trello, which we had the conversation from our previous Facebook Live. We then shifted to Office 365 and then picked up Microsoft Planner. So what we had done was transition from Trello, which worked for us, we liked it, but we moved into something that then was working with all of our other tools in one place. So, you know, we were trying to minimize how many different tools we were using for our business and get to know one that interfaced with everything else we were using. So I think mindfulness about using a standalone tool versus something that might be attached to your CRM is something to keep in mind.
Definitely. Yeah, I think the integration is really key. And a lot of tools, I think, are allowing us to integrate in a lot of different ways. But I think specifically if you are using Office 365, then being able to use the task feature and the planner app along with your teams makes a massive difference, because you're able to more easily share all of your files, and you really have that team collaborative approach within the same platform, right, without having to jump between tools. So I definitely think that is something worth considering. Absolutely.
Yeah.
Okay, cool. Next question I have is just in terms of Asana, Trello, Monday.com. Have you guys had any experience with Monday.com? And if so, how has it been? How does it compare to the other two?
Yeah, we've had a quick look at Monday.com. We've not actually used it ourselves or with a client. So what we've seen of it looks quite visual, quite attractive. But apart from that, I can't really comment on its functionality. It looks like it's got the same sort of integration ability there with lots of other tools. So it looks like it's got the capability.
Yeah.
Have you used it, Christine?
I have had a client that used it, and they had this really fancy workflow, and I was like, what? Monday.com can do this? It was really cool. They've got quite a big team, so based on they've got specific triggers that they built in, and they said, okay, based on this thing happening or this one being marked as complete, it will then automatically assign it to someone else, and it will like start moving down the workflow. And I thought that was really nice. And I realized that Asana also has this, but both of them are only available on the paid for version. So I really found that the Monday.com workflow feature was quite nice, partly because I hadn't seen it before. And the way that they were able to set up the rules, it was almost like setting up a little formula in the back end, you know, like if this, then that. Yes. And that happens. And then it gets this tag and it gets assigned to this other person, which I think is really helpful if you are starting to work in a bigger team and you're having to try and manage a project effectively as a result of that. So that then maybe just brings us to the point of paid for versus free versions. Louisa, you mentioned the free version of Trello and Asana, and I 100% agree. I think Trello is a good place to start out with if you haven't used a project management app like this before. Both Trello and Asana have free versions. Asana is free up to 15 people, which is awesome. It allows you to do the Kanban as well as like a list view, which is great. However, there are some paid features like the workflow, which you cannot access when you are on the free version. But for a small team starting out, figuring everything out, where Trello might not be able to meet all of your needs, Asana could be a good option. I think there are slightly more integration options with Asana than Trello. And maybe just refer back to our conversation that we had about Slack versus email versus WhatsApp, I think last week or the week before, where Asana and Trello can actually integrate really nicely with something like Slack. So that is a good option just to consider as well. In terms of Monday.com, they have like a 14-day free trial, which is not a lot. It really just like gets your feet wet, and you would have spent all of the time setting it up in any case, and then you would have to start paying. But if you have a bigger team than 15 and you would like to start using some of those workflow features, then Monday.com ends up being slightly cheaper than Asana. So there are a lot of apps. There are a lot of comparisons that can happen as well, and I'll link some of the articles that I checked out in the comments below, where you can just go see how all of these tools compare, because I think it's good to understand what are the different features and functionalities between all of these tools. And at the end of the day, as you ladies were saying, I think it's so important that you choose the right one for your business. And it is again about seeing what is the problem that you're trying to solve, and then based on that, choose the right tool.
Sure.
And build the confidence in your team to be confident in using the tools. I think, the giving a tool out and just allowing people to try to learn it doesn't always work that well. So, build up confidence and get people comfortable, because, this tool might be with you for a number of years. So you really need to be thinking about what your investment is if you're going to pay for something long term. It's big factor.
Yeah, for sure. And I think we need to think about how we roll out these tools, exactly what you said. Like, make sure that there's actually a process around it. Like there's like an induction or onboarding, the same way that you would have a new employee that gets onboarded. You need to onboard the tool, right? And you need to get the buy-in from everyone else in your team. So I think that is a really valid point.
Yeah.
Cool. Any final thoughts from you ladies?
Oh, sorry. I was going to say, with whatever you choose, don't give up either. Give it a chance to work. I think that's the other factor is, there's so many variations out there now that, you can flip between one and the other because, it's a shiny penny thing, isn't it? Someone mentioned it, we're going to use that now. I think give something a chance to work, but do your research at the start about what you want it to deliver. As you said, what's your problem? What are you trying to do with it? Because there are enough tools out there that you can test something and go, actually, that doesn't work for us, and move on. So it's just a matter of building that relationship with the tool to make it strong for your business. You want your tools to work for you and not the other way around.
Absolutely. Yeah, I totally agree. Make it part of your team. It is effectively like another employee because it effectively growing the productivity and the effectiveness of your team. So in the same way you would have to do your research. Exactly. Totally agree. Awesome. Any final closing thoughts? And then we'll close out this interview. It was really fun.
No, good. Thank you. It's been great.
Awesome. Yeah, cool. Thank you so much. From the Blue Ninjas, we've got Louisa Stewart and Julie Taylor. Always wonderful chatting to you ladies, and I look forward to the next one. I'm sure that there will be a next one coming up in due course, so make sure you check out the space. So until next time, we will see you guys same time, same place, talking #productivity. This is Christine and the Blue Ninjas signing out. Bye.
Bye.